There are a lot of people right now that are really disappointed with our educational system. And like the healthcare system, the educational system has things that aren't as optimized as what they should be. And we're not going to get into politics on this because there is a giant political debate going around everything. We're not going to get into any of that because I don't think that matters for what we're looking at here. What I want to look at is, what are we doing for those kids that are getting left behind, and what can we do to better serve them? And you see a lot of parents that say, the teachers are the problem. You see a lot of teachers that say the parents are the problem. You see a lot of people dumping that to doctors of different varieties to help them, move them forward, whether that's through medications or different ABA psychological things or behavioral training or whatnot. And really, when we look at this, we have to look at it as a community problem. And that's the big thing that I not only want to talk about is the perspective shift. The way, Wayne Dyer said, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And it's 100% accurate. But I'm also going to give you some strategies at the end to help your child better learn, like help them be more efficient in their learning process. So stick around on this, but let's dive into this a little bit first and kind of get an idea of where we're at. So when we look at education in general, we have about 15% of kids that are on special education classes of different kinds. That's according to the National Center for Educational Stats in 2021. When we look at college applications, we see almost 20% of kids are claiming a learning disability. Now, is this a disparity between the two? Possibly. Some of them might be, looking for a little easier path. Some of them might be diagnosed with a learning disorder that didn't require special education as well. But when we look at the actual statistics, we see about 2% of kids that are autistic. In certain parts of the nation and globally, that's closer to 10%. And even an MIT researcher said by 2050, 1 in 2, so 50%, will have autism, which is really scary. But currently it's around 2% worldwide. When we look at ADHD, we see 11%, and when we look at dyslexia, we see 15%. That comes from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and we have to look at this a little differently. So if we add those up, we come up with 28%. But some of those kids have 2 diagnoses. So I would guess that 20% estimate is probably pretty accurate to what we see in real life. And when we see this, it's difficult to kind of balance this ledger, right? Because all of those kids are going to learn differently. Whether they're autistic, whether they're ADHD, whether they're dyslexic, all of them learn differently. And you can see this in the general population. Are you an auditory learning? Do you listen more to learn? Or do you do better listening to lectures? Are you a visual learner? Do you have to see an instance of it? Are you experiential? Do you have to actually do it to learn it? And we have a lot of this in those kids. How many children do you know that have a sensory issue of some sort? They can't handle the tags on their shirts, or loud noises really disturb them, or whatever else. There's a big reason that we give kids glasses or we give kids hearing aids, and their learning goes through the roof. If we can get the proper sensation for them to actually take that step, it helps them to learn, it helps them develop, it helps them to grow. And this is very difficult to do because it's just really inefficient to change the way that you teach everybody. So it's not the most efficient way. So looking at this from more of a healthcare perspective and what we can do to improve sensation is something that can go a long way in this. But let's look at a couple of more stats here. When we look at the education of a child with special education, it costs 3 times more than those without a special education. So, like I said, it makes it very difficult to change the way we're educating. A lot of these schools are running low on money anyway. So it makes it very difficult to actually change the way we're doing that if it's 3 times more expensive. And one study said that it costs about $90,000 per child per year because of the increase in staffing that has to be done to bring them along. Now, what do we see in the brain of somebody who is struggling to learn, somebody who is having these sensory issues? We see a lack of development in the lower brainstem. The sensory development comes from that lower brainstem, and there are different things that we can do to help develop those. Primitive reflex exercises, helping with vestibular system, helping with autonomic function. If we can stimulate the brain in the right ways, it grows and it starts to develop and it starts to mature. That's really what we need in this. But if your kid is struggling with school right now, there are ways that you can help them get through things. Have them do multisensory learning. So if they're learning, having them move while they learn, having them read aloud while they learn, having them write while they learn, having them do these different things brings different senses in. When you're moving, you're bringing that kinesthetic, that vestibular system in. You feel that movement, and it helps to drive dopamine. It helps to drive some of the different sensation as well. When we use auditory learning, if you read aloud, you actually hear it as well. When you write, you actually feel the pen on the paper. And there's a big difference between using a pen and a paper versus like an iPad or a computer. There's a lot of studies out there that show that they're largely different in the way that they help your brain develop and learn and everything like that. So if you are studying, or if you are looking for ways to help your kids study better, bring in some of these different approaches and see what works well for them. Different kids are going to be more responsive to different types of therapy on that. So you're going to have to do a little bit of experimentation. Long term, what can you do? Like I said, we can really target some of that lower brainstem development. Leesman did a study in 2010. He did a 12-week intervention on, hemispheric specific intervention with these kids. They basically targeted different exercises to the kids' weaknesses. Started out with 81% of kids, they started out with 100% of the kids were diagnosed with ADHD on the Brown scale. And in a 12-week period, and I can't remember if they did this twice a week or if they did it every day of the week, but in the 12-week span, 81% of them were no longer diagnosable as ADHD. That's an incredible, just an incredible stat, 81%. And that's been replicated in many different types of studies. It's not exactly that study necessarily, but the Harvard Medical Board did a review of the Melillo method. They saw something very similar. There's new data coming out from Melillo doing the research in kids with autism in Cuba that's showing very, very similar things. So there's a lot of different ways that we can change this, but we have to find out how to target that stimulation. Is it something that you have to know exactly what it is? No, like I said, in the beginning, you can start with a little bit of experimentation to figure out what is going to work best for your kid. Long term, it's best to target that, because just like a weak muscle, if we are able to target that weak muscle and develop it, we end up eliminating that weakness. We bring more balance and we bring more robustness to the system. Same thing with the brain. If we know where that weakness is, we target it, we bring more robust function along. So I love you. I appreciate you. And like it and subscribe to this. If you like it, if you subscribe it, if you find it helpful, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, because it helps me know what you guys are finding most beneficial. If I know what you find most beneficial, I can share more of that type of stuff. So please help me out in that way. I appreciate you. Have a great day.